Hello everyone. Now I will walk you through a very interesting use case. This is about expediting patient recruitment by NLP-driven patient to trial matching. So we have leveraged our platform TCG mcube, and we've used our data science algorithms to develop a patient recruitment application. In this COVID situation, all of us are now very familiar with clinical trials, right? And we all know how important it is for these trials to finish off quickly so that the medicine can come to the market sooner. It's also important that even from a pharma company perspective, they want to finish trials faster because they want to save costs and they want to also increase the access to experimental therapy. Now, to do this, every trial has a set of inclusion-exclusion criteria, which is a long list of texts that exists. And for a patient to enroll in a particular trial, he must be fulfilling that inclusion-exclusion criteria. Now, what we have done is we've gone to a repository of clinical trials information, clinicaltrials.gov, and we have extracted information around the inclusion and exclusion criteria of many different trials. For example, we've looked at non-small cell lung cancer trials, we've looked at prostate cancer trials, we even looked at COVID trials. And we've gone through the 500s of, I think some 500 NSCLC trials or some 1,000 COVID trials and so on. Now, once we have looked at this information, we have used text mining techniques on that inclusion-exclusion criteria to come up with a superset of these criteria for specific disease areas. Similarly, we have also used our NLP engine on the patient data and the patient treatment data to come up with attributes for the patient. Now we have a matching engine, and this matching engine looks at the standardized inclusion and exclusion criteria for a specific trial and tries to match the relevant patient pool from the patient information. And now this is going to be very, very beneficial for the pharma companies as well as the physicians. So the pharma company can enter specific study details, try out different what-if scenarios, and try to see what is the matching patient pool. The physicians can come in, and if they have a specific attribute of a particular patient, they can try to find out what could be potentially some of the matching experimental studies. Now, I'll walk you through a little bit of the NLP engine that we've used here. So as you can see in the schematic, we've taken in clinicaltrials.gov data, we've taken in the patient data, and as a first step, we've done a pre-processing and standardization. And as a part of this, we've done tokenization, lemmatization, stemming, acronym normalization, and so on. At the heart of it, there are many medical dictionaries that we've used. And these dictionaries cover therapy-related information, drug-related information, other medical terms, and synonyms, and so on. So once we've done the pre-processing, then we go into the processing stage 1, where the focus is a macro understanding of these criteria or the attributes. We've used regular expression to parse these text items. We've also covered part of speech tagging and dependency structures. As a phase 2 of the processing, we've also looked at facts, entities, and their interrelationships using certain text similarity based approaches. And finally, we have the matching engine, which facilitates the patient to trial matching. We also have a feedback loop built in, where over time, as we use this matching engine, the matching and the processing becomes even more accurate with time. I will now go over and give you a brief demonstration of this particular solution. As a first step, I'll log into the application. So we get started. So we can browse different trials that exist. So for example, if I click on browse trials and I want to understand what kind of clinical trials are going on in which areas as per clinicaltrials.gov to see what is the spread across different geographies. I can go in and select a particular trial. So let's say I'm interested in infectious diseases and as a condition, we are interested in, let's say, COVID. Okay. So this gives me a layout of all the different COVID trials that are currently ongoing. We can zoom in and zoom out on different areas. We can look at the different sponsors who are doing different COVID trials right now. So let's zoom in over here. Each of these dots are on specific zip codes, and it gives me the names of different sites and the associated studies that are ongoing. So the NCT IDs are, each NCT ID represents a specific study in that particular disease area. And we can go full screen and zoom in and zoom out. So as you can see, if I look at the Chicago area, we have around 8 studies ongoing across 5 sites with a total enrollment of 103 patients. And we can zoom back in, and there's a lot of activity going on the East Coast. There seems to be a center over there. And I can zoom into specific points and specific zip codes over there to understand what kind of COVID trial activity is going on in specific areas across the geography. Now, this gives me a wide overview of all the different COVID trials. Now we get down to a granular level of inclusion-exclusion criteria associated with each of these trials. So now if I go into a design trial mode and choose the COVID template, we see a wide assortment of criteria over here. Now, this set of criteria has been derived by going through thousands of trials from clinicaltrials.gov and applying our NLP engine on the inclusion and exclusion criteria set of those trials. So we have inclusion and exclusion criteria related to autoimmune disease, the disease history of the patients, the hypersensitivity, the age, the exposure, indications, different procedures, different medications, other infectious disease that the patient might be infected with, if there are any liver diseases. So all of these are different criteria that have been specified in one or more COVID trials. And this is like a standardized superset derived by applying the NLP engine. Now, to design a new trial, let's say I have access to, standardized patient information, and we have some 15,000 patients in our repository. Now, I want to understand by designing a new trial, let's say I want to design a trial using a Crohn's disease as a precondition with a disease history of CKD. Let's choose a hypersensitivity parameter here. Let's assume that the precondition is a cardiovascular disease and the minimum age of the patient has to be 18. And we click on the search button over here. Once we submit that, the matching engine now runs and tries to match the standardized attribute with the patient level information. It's now going through each and every patient details and finding the standardized attribute of the patient to come up with a match. So now we see that out of those 15,000 plus patients, only 69 fulfill this particular criteria. We can get even more restrictive. So for example, I might say, okay, the patient has to have all these inclusion criteria, and in addition to that, should not have acute respiratory disease syndrome. So I choose that as an exclusion criteria. And I go back and submit my results again. So when I do that, it's again taking into account this additional criteria and going through the different patient attributes again to give me the new set of match. We are using Spark as a mainstay of our platform. So that's why even on very large data sets, we get a very fast response. So now we see we are down to 50 patients. Now, if we want to understand the geographic spread of those 50 patients, we can do a deep dive here. And we can see, okay, these 50 patients primarily on the East Coast, and we can zoom in and get to the individual zip code locations of these 20 patients. And we can also get the gender and race distribution of these patients as well as the age distribution. So in this way, we can try out different scenarios to understand what kind of matching patients we are getting as we select different sets of inclusion and exclusion criteria. And this will help me design trials in a way such that the trials fulfill the requirement for a particular protocol and also do not become too restrictive, because if a trial design becomes too restrictive and we do not find enough patients, then the trial will take a long time to complete, or may not even complete because they'll not find adequate number of patients. So this is one of the examples where the NLP engine can come in really useful. And this, as I mentioned, this is in today's age, this is a very exciting application as we all talk about the importance of clinical trials.